In 2017, 2 teenage girls were murdered while out taking a hike on their day off from school. But what the killer didn't bank on was that one of his victims was an absolute badass, and her bravery would practically gift wrap the perpetrator for law enforcement. Welcome to another episode of The Blair Itch. Welcome to The Blair Itch, the show that scratches that true crime and spooky stories itch that's really starting to peel. Ugh. Today, we're off to North America and the tiny rural town of Delphi, Indiana, for a story so tragic and infuriating, it'll make you want to pull your hair out. So get yourselves comfortable, because this one is bound to piss you off. This is the story of Abby, Libby, and the Delphi murders. Liberty German, known as Libby, was a bright, charismatic 14-year-old. She was passionate about photography and had a keen interest in science and forensic studies. Her friend, Abigail Williams, was a creative and energetic 13-year-old who loved to draw and play softball. Together, they were known for their sense of humor and adventurous spirit. Their families described them as inseparable. Libby and Abby shared a deep friendship, the kind only young teens can know. They went to the same school, shared the same group of friends, and supported each other through everything. On February 13th, 2017, they made plans to spend their day off school on a hike. They loved taking photos, so Libby asked her sister to drop them off at the Monon High Bridge Trail around 1:30 p.m. They were expected to be picked up a few hours later, but as the afternoon turned to evening, a sense of dread began to creep in. So the reason Abby and Libby were off school that day is because it was what was known as a make-up snow day. What that is in America, in towns where snow days are common through the winter, they basically have a set amount of snow days that are built into the calendar every single year. And if those snow days aren't used up, then you get to take them after winter is done. And we're coming into spring now. It was February. Everybody was off school. It was a beautiful day in Delphi. It was very warm for the time of year. I think someone described it as a summer day in the middle of winter. It was a really, really nice day. It's a long, cold, dark winter, and people just wanted to get out and about and, go for a walk, get outside. So the Monon High Bridge Trail is one of several historical trails in and around Delphi. It winds its way through scenic woodland, and it gives you beautiful views of Deer Creek and the surrounding areas. Now, one of the main attractions of this trail is, of course, the Monon High Bridge itself. This is an old railway bridge built in the 1890s, I believe, that used to carry trains across Deer Creek, and it's one of the biggest bridges in Indiana, or certainly the tallest. It was abandoned in 1987, and it now kind of sits there in a state of disrepair. It's essentially falling apart, but it's a local landmark. Teenagers go there for their prom photos. Kids walk across it all the time. It's kind of like a rite of passage, even though it is falling apart, and you can see down through the slats to the creek below, and if you fall off, it is certain death. It's dangerous. It's in today's world, I'm surprised it isn't fenced off or something, but kids walked across it all the time. It was nothing out of the ordinary, and that is exactly what Abby and Libby were doing on this beautiful February day. They were out on the bridge, just messing around like teenagers do. Libby's father had arranged to collect them at 3:15, but the girls were nowhere to be seen, and when Libby's family tried to reach her, their calls went unanswered. Her family initially thought maybe the girls had wandered out of cell range or were simply enjoying the trail longer than expected. But as time passed, their silence grew alarming. Soon, their unease would grow into a frantic search, with community members joining police to comb through the dense forest. Friends, neighbors and volunteers searched through the night, scouring every inch of the trails and nearby areas. But by early morning on February 14th, the weight of fear grew heavy on Delphi. So at first when the police were searching, they thought the girls had simply got lost or run off or something, and they'd be found and they'd be cold and tired and hungry. Now bizarrely, once it got dark, they were offered a drone with thermal imaging capabilities, which would fly over the area, over the woods, and it would pick up a heat signature from anyone lost in the woods, within minutes. They would be able to see where they were, pinpoint their location, and go and get them. But for some reason, the police declined this offer. Why? Don't know, but this is one of the first of many missteps in this case that just add up into absolute incompetence. Still, they continue to search, hoping that the girls would be found safe and sound, but sadly, it wasn't meant to be. Around noon, searchers made a devastating discovery near the creek, just a short distance from the Monon High Bridge. The bodies of Liberty German and Abigail Williams were found, and the nature of their deaths was immediately considered suspicious. Authorities quickly declared the case a double homicide, but withheld many details from the public. This tight-lipped approach left the town of Delphi on edge as friends and family members grieved and speculated. For many, the fear of an unknown killer among them cast a shadow over the once peaceful community. So the investigators decided to keep tight-lipped about the crime. They didn't want to release any real details to the public. And the reason for this is they don't want to incite false confessions or, tips that are a waste of time. The idea is if they arrest a suspect and they say something only the killer and the police know, they know they've got their man, right? They know it's a credible lead. It's a credible bit of information. But I've always found it weird how the police were essentially like, yep, 2 girls have been murdered. The suspect is still on the loose because we haven't arrested anybody yet, but I'm sure it'll be fine. Have fun. Jokes aside, it was an understandable tactic in some ways, but it did nothing to appease and relieve the residents of Delphi. But what the residents and the killer didn't realize is investigators actually had an ace up their sleeve. Incredibly, Liberty German's phone was found by investigators underneath her body. Had the killer not seen it? Could the phone provide a vital piece of evidence and lead them to the culprit? Despite the terrifying circumstances, Liberty German had the presence of mind to capture footage on her phone that would later become crucial to the investigation. In one image posted to Snapchat, she captured Abby walking across the bridge, but shortly after, Libby recorded a video of a man approaching them in the distance. The man's voice was also captured, saying, "Down the hill." The grainy image of a man in a blue jacket and jeans, hands in his pockets, became the central focus of the investigation. This image, combined with the voice recording, became the defining clues in the Delphi case. Who was this man? Was he someone the girls knew, or a stranger who had been lurking on the trail? The haunting phrase, "down the hill," suggests he was directing them, but the context and meaning of these words remained a mystery. The release of the video and audio clip led to a surge of tips, and the community rallied around the families, hoping that justice was close. Law enforcement combed through thousands of leads, but no one could definitively identify the man in the video. Delphi's close-knit residents struggled to come to terms with the reality that the killer might be among them. Now, if you've ever watched Don't F with Cats or any true crime documentary in the modern era, you know what comes next. Over the coming years, internet detectives on communities such as Reddit and YouTube would pore over every publicly available detail of the case and name several suspects, combing through their lives and social media profiles with reckless abandon. Bloggers would write articles and speculate on details of the crime scene in harrowing and disturbing detail. Giant teddy bears at the scene, sexual assault with tree branches, ritual sacrifice. Posters would brainstorm how they believed the girls were killed, with theories ranging from human trafficking to being set upon by attack dogs. YouTubers would launch their careers covering the case. The more outlandish the angle, the more clicks on their channel, and still, despite the wild and often unchecked speculation, no arrests were made, and the case stalled. More than 2 years after the murders, police released a second suspect sketch, one that was strikingly different from the first. The initial sketch depicted an older man with a goatee, while the newer image showed a younger, clean-shaven man. Authorities clarified that the new sketch superseded the first, but offered little explanation, leaving the public to wonder if investigators were working from entirely new information. This change sparked questions and fueled rampant speculation. Was the investigation focused on a new suspect? Were they trying to draw out the killer by changing tactics? While some believed this new sketch was a sign of progress, others feared it meant the investigation had hit a dead end. And it didn't stop there. Things were about to come a whole lot darker. Around this time, it also emerged publicly that Liberty German was being catfished by a PDF file, with unconfirmed rumours they had spoken on the morning of the murders. Keegan Klein, a 27-year-old from the nearby town of Peru, had been contacting multiple underage girls under the pseudonym Anthony Shots online. According to Klein, he exchanged messages with more than a dozen underage girls and received pictures from them. Naturally, people began to speculate he was involved in the murders somehow, and internet investigators went into overdrive. Surely, it was only a matter of time before law enforcement would announce they had their man. Nope. It went quiet again, and the frustration on message boards, and I'm sure by extension the community of Delphi, was palpable by this point. In the autumn of 2022, the internet was sent into a frenzy when police executed a search warrant at the house of an as yet unnamed suspect in the case. Someone who had slipped under the radar of both the police and the internet armchair investigators. Richard Allen, a local resident and employee at the local CVS, was arrested and charged with the murders of both girls in October after police found an unspent .40 caliber round close to the bodies of the teenage victims that they believe came from Allen's handgun. The Sig Sauer model P226, which Richard Allen had owned since 2001, was found during a search of his home. So if it wasn't abundantly clear that law enforcement were doing a pretty shoddy job, this is the point where it really becomes obvious. Richard Allen came forward to police a few days after the murders and put himself at the trail. Not just at the trail, he put himself on the bridge at the same time that Abby and Libby were there. He said he was there looking at a stock ticker on his phone and watching the fish. I don't mean to kink shame anybody, but you know, that's pretty weird, is it not? Do people go to places to watch the fish? Could have made up anything. Could have said, oh, I just fancied a walk on the trail that day. It was a lovely day. I saw a funny cloud and I followed it to the trail that day. Watching the fish. All right, mate. He said he was wearing the same clothes as the guy in Libby's video. He's the same height and stature. He said he passed 3 girls on the trail who also identified him in their witness statements. Now, despite these revelations, police looked at all of this and just said, nah, But no, the real reason is the police interview with Richard Allen was actually misfiled by accident, and so it was lost. And it wasn't till a police secretary came across it by accident when she was sorting some boxes in 2022. She then passed it on to the police, who finally acted on it. They were like, of course. Finally, it looked as though the police have their man. Or do they? While in jail awaiting trial, Allen apparently confessed 5 or 6 times to killing the girls, making multiple confessions to multiple people. But his defense team have argued this is due to his failing mental state. Guards and other officials at the prison have reported Allen flushing his Bible down the toilet, eating his court documents, and stripping naked and eating his own fecal matter. In a huge twist to the case, Richard Allen's attorneys claim that the murders were carried out by members of a pagan Norse religion and white nationalist group called Odinists. In a bombshell filing submitted in September 2024, the nature of the crime scene pointed to the work of a cult, according to the 135-page document. Libby and Abby's bodies had both been staged, with tree branches and sticks across their bodies in the shape of pagan symbols, the document states, which resembled possible Odinism signatures left behind at the crime scene. Allen's attorneys have since been banned from bringing up the names or anything to do with the Odinism cult theory. Special Judge Francis Gull issued the ruling in September, just weeks before the trial started. The trial of Richard Allen, as of the time of this video, is still ongoing, and new details are emerging all the time. Online, some people are skeptical of Allen's involvement due to the often flimsy and circumstantial nature of the prosecution case, including some testimony from dubious witnesses. For example, the prison psychologist who looked after Allen allegedly had an obsessive interest in the case, often researching it in her spare time and listening to podcasts about it. Some people are worried the wrong person is being railroaded for the sake of holding anyone accountable for the horrific murders, and the real killer is still at large and could possibly strike again. Will the jury be able to convict, or is there enough reasonable doubt to acquit? Only time will tell. This case is absolutely tragic for me. It's stuck with me over the years since I've read about it, not only for the brutal and senseless murder of 2 innocent girls, but the absolute ineptitude of law enforcement looking after the case. And I just think it's tragic all round. And even now they have a suspect on trial, and there's so many questions around it that I just don't feel particularly comfortable with it. It's emerged that Allen has been severely mistreated in jail. He was put in solitary confinement for like 3 months or something, and I believe the UN classes anything over 15 days as torture. You know, there's talk of false confessions, psychosis, induced by the terrible conditions at the jail. The judge, Francis Gull, has been making loads of questionable decisions and denying Richard Allen and his attorneys the chance to present their Odinism theory in trial. And you know, it's a wacky theory, but so what? He should be allowed to present any defense he wants. It's up to the jury to decide if they think it's bullshit or not some rando judge. I don't get that. It doesn't sit right with me. She has just put a bar on that. She banned an FBI agent from testifying for the defense for no reason, because the prosecution didn't even argue with it. She was just like, no, sorry, not happening. Members of the FBI themselves were convinced Richard Allen was the wrong guy, and they felt so strongly they actually wrote to local authorities saying, look, you've got the wrong guy. It's crazy. Do I think Richard Allen is guilty? Probably. Would I be able to convict on a jury beyond all reasonable doubt? I don't think I would, to be honest. And that's a horrible situation to find ourselves in, you know. Either Alan goes to jail and he's guilty, but there will always be questions, or he gets acquitted and potentially a child killer is back on the loose. You know, it's all a mess. And it's an insult to Abby and Libby, who above all else, they deserve a fair and honest trial and they deserve justice. And I'm not sure it's being done in the right way right now or handled in the correct way, but who knows? Only time will tell. The trial is currently ongoing. I think we're in week 3 or 4, so a verdict will be reached soon. Maybe I'll come back and I'll do another video when they deliver the final verdict and we'll discuss it some more. But in the meantime, let me know down below, do you think Richard Allen is guilty? What are your theories on the case? I'd love to know and chat with you. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching again, guys. Take care of yourselves and look after each other. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.